afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, or good morning, I think still to Germany for those of you who joined from Germany. My name is Stefan Alusa. I'm the Director General of the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, and I welcome you all to our webinar today with the topic of navigating BIS regulations to secure market access in India. We called it urgent, and I think the number of participants also indicates that it's not only urgent, it's also very important for the industry. And we're very happy that we have the chance to organize, or having had the chance to organize, the webinar today with our knowledge partners, Rödl & Partner, and also the Make in India Mittelstand program of the Embassy of India in Delhi. We are, in Berlin, of course. We are introducing today the Bureau of Indian Standards, which has already been established in 1986 and plays a key role in creating a safe and trustworthy marketplace through its extensive standardization initiatives. By focusing on quality and safety, and BIS safeguards consumers while also boosting the national industrial competitiveness. The key takeaways for today will be an introduction to the Bureau of Indian Standards, the importance of standards, the certification process, which I think is becoming more and more important in recent months. And we also compiled a brochure a little while back that you can download from our website. It is about BIS and the product safety and the challenges in future of BIS, the current challenges in standardization in India. And this, as you probably all know, and this is why many of you have already joined, of course, there's an increase of the numbers of standards that are being announced and quality control orders that are being based on these standards, which are relevant for all companies that are selling products on the market in India. And it is very, very important for everyone to be fully aware of the individual quality control orders, of the standards that they are based on, and the impact on the business. And in that regard, I'm very happy that we have with us today Mayank Tripathi as our expert to speak about the Bureau of and the BIS regulations. Mayank is a consultant at the Pune office of Rödl & Partner. He supports compliance, corporate, contract, commercial, and regulatory practice, specializing in BIS compliance, trade regulations, and policy advisory. He has been working for Rödl & Partner in India since October 2023. He's a legal professional with key areas of interest in, and specialization in regulatory law, data privacy law, technology transaction, and commercial transactions. Mayank has completed his graduation in law from the National Law University Nagpur and is wrote with the Bar Council of India. So Mayank, again, we're very happy, of course, to have you here to introduce this important topic to us, to our attendees in India and in Germany. Before I hand over, I want to make everyone aware that there is an opportunity to ask questions in the chat function. Please go ahead and do that. Then these questions can and will be picked up afterwards, because following Mayank's presentation, we will also have the chance to answer some of the questions that you may have immediately. And with that, I would like to hand over to Mayank, please.
Thank you, Mr. Halusa, for the lovely introduction. I would start by thanking IGCC for partnering with us to focus on the urgent topic, which is the Bureau of Indian Standards. With the pleasantries exchanged, now I would like to come to the hero of the topic, which is the Bureau of Indian Standards. So if we can go back to the slides, please, the introductory one. Thank you. The earlier one, please. Yeah, so the topic for today, as it is very evident that there is a need of an urgent compliance, which is due in the coming August of 2025. So the topic that we choose today is the BIS regulations unveiled, immediate attention to safeguard your market access into India. Because Bureau of Indian Standards seems to be a little bit tricky and confusing at times, I have divided the agenda in 4 points. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'll be introducing and giving a brief background about how Bureau of Indian Standards exactly works, and what is the intention behind establishing the Bureau of Indian Standards, and how it has come far with the evolution and the changes made in the technology in guaranteeing the safety and reliability of the products which are imported or produced within India. Because most of the people who have joined this webinar are the entity of the foreign manufacturers. So I would be particularly focusing upon the foreign manufacturers for which the schemes are attracted towards them, and will be guiding through the entire process as it stands and has been mandated by the Bureau of Indian Standards. In case I fail to clarify certain aspects, we do have an option of following it up with a question and answer round. So with that, I would like to begin with the first part, which is the introduction of the Bureau of Indian Standards. The evolution and the journey of BIS in India would be covered under this section, along with how the quality control orders are perceived. Then I would touch base upon the overview of the BIS schemes which are currently prevalent and running in India and the respective line ministries. And then I'll be briefly touching upon the BIS process. Next slide, please. So unlike popular belief, the BIS, which is the Bureau of Indian Standards, finds its fruition back to 1946. That is 1 year before when the Indian nation got its independence from the Britishers. Earlier, it was known as Indian Standardization Institution, which was established in 1947 based upon the inputs of the technical qualifications which were given by the Britishers. So Indian standardization institutions, the scope of the Indian Standards Institution were very limited. It only concerned with certifying certain food grade products, like for example, the water bottles, and it was pushed into effect in order to convince the customers that whatever that they're paying for, they are getting the quality for which they have been paying for. Nowadays, you can see an ISI mark onto the small water bottles or plastic water bottles that we buy from the market. As soon as you see an ISI symbol, it gives you the conviction and belief that the product that you have paid the money for is treated in accordance with what has been written in the label. So hence, why this example has been taken by me is to highlight the importance about how the Indian population as a whole gets convinced by seeing the ISI mark and a BIS certification. It gives them a robust sense of belief that the quality for the products that they're buying are ensured and the money which they are paying for it is catered to according to their needs, which they are demanding. After the launch of ISI, it was felt because during the 1950s and 1960s, there was a trend of growing global manufacturing processes, and India was also following under the same footsteps. So in 1950s and 1960s, the government was of the view that there has to be some sort of standardization which should be put into picture. And with the launch of certification mark scheme, the Indian standards as we see it today were formulated by the respective counterparts of the Indian government and the line ministries. And those Indian standards were put into place under the certification mark schemes, according to which whatever Indian standard was relevant to a certain set of product types or the product group was certified under those defined set of parameters of the Indian standards, and hence a certification mark was granted to that particular manufacturer if they were fulfilling the technical parameters of the Indian standards which were formulated. Next, the question came up, what sort of laboratory will be able to independently identify? Because all the manufacturers were portraying their products which were produced within India as BIS compliant, but there was no mechanism to check whether that particular product is of a certain quality, which led to mismarking and mismanagement and the use of the BIS certification under the bad light. In order to tackle those particular problems, a independent laboratory infrastructure was set up in 1963, under which BIS consulted with local laboratories having enough infrastructure to send samples from the manufacturers of the products that they are exhibiting BIS compliance for, testing them independently based upon the Indian standards parameter which have been set. And based on these reports, the Bureau of Indian Standards, which is the BIS, was able to take a decision whether to grant a manufacturer a particular certificate, or in case a certificate is granted, whether to renew it or not. With the advent of the industrialization, and as India was going to get globalized in the next 5 years, the government preconceived and pre-perceived that it is now important to bring a holistic regulation under which there would be a specific demarcation and the role of the Bureau of Indian Standards. So the first set of approach was the introduction of the Bureau of Indian Standards Act 1986. With the advent of this particular act, the Indian Parliament guaranteed that BIS Act would give power to the Bureau of Indian Standards to check and enforce the quality management throughout the country, which led to the formation of the Bureau of Indian Standard Act as it exists today. And the main location, which is the Manak Bhavan, is located in New Delhi, India as of now. Please, can I have the next slide? So then after 1987, all the processes were streamlined, Indian standards were formulated, the lab infrastructure was working as per their expectation. But due to the advancement of technology, because as we know during the 90s and the 2000s, there was a lot of technological advancements, and it was felt by the Indian Parliament that the Bureau of Indian Standard Act of 1987 is failing in essence of catching up with the time. Hence, a decision was taken by the Parliament to introduce the current Bureau of Indian Standards Act of 2016 with a certain set of power, which set forth the Bureau of Indian Standard as the national standardization body, which is responsible for granting standardization, granting a certification upon the conformity assessment. The main aim of the Bureau of Indian Standards, that is the BIS, was to promote exports and imports within the territory of India, and the ultimate goal was to ensure the safety, reliability, and the quality of the goods which were going to be produced domestically or to be imported from any other country which is considered abroad, that is outside the jurisdictional territory of India. It followed a certain set of regulation when the power arrived for the conformity assessment, because the BIS Act guaranteed enforcement power to the Bureau of Indian Standards so that they can implement mandatory certifications, by the way of which they could introduce quality control orders, which are nowadays known as QCOs. In case a particular manufacturer, after introducing the quality control orders and setting the maximum deadline for compliance, is not following those orders, this is the first time with which the Bureau of Indian Standards as a standardization body was equipped with the enforcement powers, where they can impose penalty or seize the goods for which a quality control order is issued and a BIS certification is not obtained from a concerned manufacturers. So when a BIS certificate is granted, in order to exhibit, there is a requirement of labeling, or which is known as homologation as well. So there would be a necessity of homologation of the standard marks onto the goods which are other than jewelry. And as we know, there is a concept of hallmarking for the gold jewelries that many of the jewelers, they sell into the Indian market. Can we have the next slide? So now the question comes, what is the most famous quality control orders? So I would like to tell you, quality control orders are nothing, but these are the orders which are introduced when Bureau of Indian Standard work with line ministries. So unlike popular belief, BIS is only an enforcement authority and not the deciding authority by the way of which of the products would fall under a mandatory quality control order. When I say this, to uncomplicate this particular statement, it can be perceived that there are 18 different line ministries. For example, Ministry of Heavy Industries, Ministry of Steel, Ministry of Electronics, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. These are the line ministries which approach the Bureau of Indian Standard because they have the technical know-how of drafting and formulating a standard, and they want the BIS to formulate a particular Indian standard by the way of which a compliance becomes necessary. So in addition to this particular information, I would like to inform all of you that right now in India, there are more than 22,000 Indian standards which are there. When I say 22,000 Indian standards, not every of the Indian standard is compulsory followed. Rather, when a quality control order with the consideration and recommendation of a particular line ministry with the BIS is notified in the official Gazette of India, then it becomes a quality control order. So to give you a comparison, because India has drafted 22,000 plus voluntary Indian standards, when I say voluntary, before the draft of a particular quality control order, all the Indian standards which are formulated are voluntary in nature. So the aim of these Indian standards by the Bureau of Indian Standards was that in case a person or a manufacturer obtains a certain set of Indian standard, he or she would be able to exhibit to the end consumer that he or she or the manufacturer in concern is conforming to the quality standards which are there. This enabled them to charge a premium from their competitors who were not having the BIS mark. But however, no manufacturer was following this compliance because it is a very laid back, it is a very strong and stringent process and is not a laid back process. Then the line ministries decided to impose quality control orders to ensure safety and reliability of the goods, simultaneously tackling with the anti-dumping strategies which have been followed from a long period of time when India was concerned. So in a nutshell, a QCO when introduced highlights certain product types which are there, and it highlights the Indian standard which would be applicable to a certain set of product along with the enforcement date. It could be 6 months from the publication of that particular quality control order. It could be a year, it could be 2 years, depending upon the discretion of the line ministry with along with the discussion with the Bureau of Indian Standards. As soon as a quality control order comes into picture along with its enforcement date, those Indian standards and those product type no longer remain an optional certification requirement, but a mandatory one. So it could be understood whenever a quality control order seeks its validity and the enforcement date, whatever product types and the Indian standards which are mentioned against that particular product, the compliance of requiring a BIS certificate not is no longer optional but becomes mandatory. Can I have the next slide, please? So in a nutshell, I have told you about how the quality control orders are and how do they function. But the most important question is what is exactly the BIS certification and how do a particular manufacturer find out that my product are falling under those particular certifications? So I would like to inform you all that there are different types of certification schemes which are offered by Bureau of Indian Standards. Some of these are, as you can see on your screens. I'll start with Domestic Manufacturer Certification Scheme, colloquially known as DMCS. Domestic Manufacturer Certification Scheme, as the name says, covers all the domestic manufacturing unit which are located in the jurisdictional territory of India. So if any manufacturer is producing a certain set of products which requires mandatory compliance with the BIS and the Indian standards, and it has been mandated by the line ministry in consultation with the Bureau of Indian Standard as mandatory through a quality control order, then they have to undergo a BIS analysis and obtain a BIS scheme registration under Domestic Manufacturer Certification Scheme. The counterpart to the same is the Foreign Manufacturer Certification Scheme. As the name states, that foreign manufacturers, if any sort of manufacturer who is producing their goods outside the jurisdictional territory of India, so it could be China, it could be Bangladesh, it could be as far as Iceland, it doesn't matter if it does not fall within the territorial jurisdiction of India, the manufacturing unit or the manufacturer has to obtain a certification under the Foreign Manufacturer Certification Scheme. The next one is the quality management scheme. Under the quality management scheme, the ISO certifications like 9001, 2015, ISO 14001 or ISO 25001 schemes as such, BIS also operate an equivalent scheme which is known as the quality management scheme. Most of the things which are falling under the quality management scheme, which is the QMS, remains voluntary in nature, but it gives an added advantage to the manufacturer when they're undergoing the mandatory BIS certification. If they exhibit compliance with the quality management system, it increases their chances and expediting the process of obtaining a BIS certificate, because it gives the BIS officials a conviction that if the quality management scheme certification is guaranteed, being voluntary in nature, then a particular manufacturer would be relying upon the quality goods, which is the ultimate aim of all the Bureau of Indian Standard schemes. The next one is the compulsory registration scheme, also known as CRS. Under CRS, right now there are more than 56 products. This is only oriented towards fast moving electronic consumer goods such as the laptops, the mobile phones and the batteries which are to be imported are covered under the CRS. The next one is the Indian Standard Institution Scheme, which is the oldest running scheme in India when BIS is concerned. You could find the ISI marks in your water bottles, you could find them onto the helmets, you could find them onto the raincoats which you buy as a consumer from outside the market. If you'll see the crimp, you'll find an ISI label patched onto those particular products, which gives you the conviction that for a particular set of product, quality is ensured. The next one is the most famous hallmark scheme. So as many of you will be aware of it, and like it is a saying that Indian moms are the most price sensitive individuals that could exist in the world. So with the advent of the hallmark scheme, what has happened is BIS was assaying the quality of the gold which was there that people were buying from the jewelry shop. So whenever our moms being or labeled as so price sensitive regarding what they are paying for, whenever they ask a particular jeweler that do you have a BIS hallmark, even though they don't know about how it works or how it functions and what sort of scheme or the test it undergoes, the moment they find out that it is 916 hallmark certified, they stop asking questions to the jewelers and they blindly buy that particular jewelry by paying 1 or 2% extra premium. So why I have included this hallmark scheme into it, although it is not related for the individuals who have joined the webinar today, is give you the idea of conviction that that Indians have in their mentality, that whenever they will see a BIS mark, they would then and there stop asking questions regarding the quality of a particular product which is there. And at the end of the day, they will be willing to pay 1 or 2 or 5% of extra premium for the goods that they're willing to buy. So this must be kept in consideration that while applying the BIS certification, it might seem that the process is long stretched and it is very complicated. But as soon as a BIS mark is granted to a particular manufacturer, it sort of creates a virtual monopoly under which a particular consumer won't be asking the questions regarding the quality, because the trust has remained in the minds of the Indian consumers from a long period of time. The next scheme is the EcoMark scheme. It is the most newly introduced scheme, which was introduced in the September of 2024. With the advent of the EcoMark scheme, it is an effort by the Bureau of Indian Standard to promote the environmental sustainable goals or the ESG compliance of a particular company. Although largely it remains voluntary in nature, but the thing is that if a particular manufacturer obtains an eco mark onto their products, it helps them market and exhibit their compliance with the eco-friendliness, and it helps in exhibiting them as carbon neutral or going to be carbon neutral in the future, which helps in the business agenda of the things, as ESG compliance as well as eco sustainability has become a most important and a sustainable topic, particularly in the manufacturing sector or across the sectors, if we are talking about a consumer and a manufacturer relationship about. So moving forward, natural questions would be, how do I find out if my product requires BIS certification? Or how do I know which BIS scheme applies to my products or services? So the answer to would that be that if a particular product set is there and you have identified under your bill of materials the HSN codes which are there is a website by the Indian government from where you can check the upcoming as well as the pre-existing quality control orders. It is, if you'll write onto your system e-gazette, you would be redirected to that website which is run by the Indian government, and under which you have to write the details of your product's name, and you will be finding a respective quality control order which is going to be published or has been already published. And by watching the deadline of that particular product, a manufacturer can plan whether to go ahead with the BIS certification or are their products are falling under the mandatory BIS certification requirement. The second thing is how a particular manufacturer would know which sort of BIS scheme would apply to their products. So this is the most crucial part, because as I told you, there are multiple schemes which are running as of now under the foreign manufacturer certification scheme or the domestic manufacturer scheme. It is very essential to carve out under which what product type is covered by a particular scheme, because the thing is that if an application is sent to the BIS under a false scheme for the product which is already mandated under the BIS compliance, the thing would be the BIS would return back with the feedback that although your product requires a particular set of BIS mandatory BIS to be taken, but then they would want you to apply into the respective scheme according to which under which your product would be falling under. So this would take back us in terms of the timelines or the time which has been consumed in order to comply with the same. So the next question would be, will my certificate lose its validity, or what would be the validity of the BIS certificate which is granted to us? So usually it is completely discretionary upon the Bureau of Indian Standard officials, which I would cover in the subsequent part of my presentation. Usually the validity of the certificate is from 1 year to 6 years, and it is completely discretionary upon the BIS officials whether to grant a 1 year certificate or a 6 year certificate. If the validity expires, it is advisable for the manufacturers that before 6 months of the expiration of your certificate, a renewal application shall be filed to the BIS for their consideration, so that your product pipeline does not get disrupted because your current certificate may expire before the oncoming of a renewed certificate. Regarding the necessary steps and the documentations which are required for the certification, I would be covering them in the subsequent slides. May I have the next slides, please? So regarding the BIS certification process. So BIS certification process, as I told you, there are various schemes under which a BIS certification can be applied for depending upon the product type, the HSN, the product group, or the line ministry which has notified a particular quality control order. So this process involves mainly, I have outlined this particular process into 5 steps just to uncomplicate the things. The first step is the preparation of application documents and submission to the BIS. Although it is the first step and it might seem a formality, but let me be very candid and tell you this is the most important step regarding your entire BIS issuance, because this is the step which would make you or break your application at the end of the BIS, and this is the step which would decide that whether a BIS certificate is granted rapidly in a less course of time, or it is prolonged, or you get bombarded with the questions from the BIS. So the preparation of application documents requires the submission of technical documents, the raw materials which goes into the production of a particular component assembly, sub-assemblies, or the products in question, a detailed description along with a technical file while identifying an Indian standard along with any international certifications like CE certification, the Triple C certification, the North Atlantic Quality Assurance certification, or any in-house testing report must be submitted to the BIS at this particular step. Because when people ask me about the application document submission, I tell them it works on the principle of the more the merrier. The more you're able to exhibit to the Bureau of Indian Standards that your quality and safety assurances are there, and the more proofs that we supplement to the BIS during the application stage, the more chances are there that the BIS won't be reaching us back with multiple queries and throwing up multiple plethora of questions onto us, and would process the application smoothly. Hence, this is the most important step which has to be carefully done. And while making an application, it must be kept in mind that whatever documentation regarding the quality assurance as well as the manufacturing process and the required components about how they function, as well as the list of testing equipment, as well as the list of raw materials, has to be supplemented under the application before submitting it to the BIS. After the submission of that particular application to the BIS, they scrutinize the entire application based upon the merits that we have applied for. After that, there is a provision of factory inspection, or which is also known as production audit. So after processing your application for the manufacturing unit that you have applied for, the BIS will contact you by saying that there is a requirement of a visit or an audit inspection. So BIS have their consultants on their panel who are also known as subject matter experts. BIS would outline the subject matter expert, which would go to the concerned manufacturing unit for which an application has been made. And the main aim of this factory or audit inspection is to see that whatever files have been submitted during the application process regarding a particular manufacturing unit translates in front of their own eyes. So to understand it in an easier point of view, it could be concluded that it is an official factory tour that they would want you to organize, wherein they would be coming up with a certain set of questions regarding the application that you have submitted. And upon successful submission of those questions as well as the factory visit, these subject matter experts, they have the option of sending your products for testing and compliance requirements. So how the testing and compliance works is they, out of 1,000 products that a particular manufacturing unit has produced, they would sample one of the product, they would seal it by taking your signature, and they would send that particular product to a BIS accredited lab in India. That BIS accredited lab in India would test your particular product with the Indian standards which are applicable. And upon achieving the minimum threshold which they have set, or the parameters they have set in the Indian standards, that said laboratory will send a lab test report, which is known as LTR, to the BIS. And upon consideration of the application, the visit comments, as well as the LTR, which is the lab test report, the BIS would be deciding whether to issue you a certificate, which is also known as a BIS certificate. After the issuance of the BIS certificate, the process is not over, because there remains a homologation and labeling requirement. So it is expected by the Bureau of Indian Standards that whatever product set have been BIS certified has to carry a homologated label, which would present that under what Indian standard a particular component or a product is already certified. Can I have the next slide, please? So, because I gave you a brief introduction about how the BIS process flows together, the main agenda of ours is to concentrate upon the foreign manufacturers. So under this section, I would throw some light on foreign manufacturer certification scheme. Then I would move on to the much debated scheme 10, which has been introduced by the BIS, or rather I should say it has come into the news last year with the introduction of the Omnibus Technical Regulation Order of 2024. But let me tell you that this has been in existence from 2019, but the impacts and the implications were varied at that particular point of time, and hence it has come into the news from the last year and particularly this year. Then under the Omnibus Technical Regulation Order of 2024, I will be throwing some light on how the conformity to standards is done, what is the role of authorized Indian representative, and how many applications are to be filed in case of deciding and going for a BIS certification mark. And obviously, it is very important to know about the possibility of seizures and penalties in case a particular manufacturer is not BIS compliant. Can I have the next slide, please? So as I was telling you during the introduction of this particular presentation, that there exists a scheme which is known as Foreign Manufacturer Certification Scheme, also known as FMCS. So FMCS follows the same principle. First of all, FMCS wants you to identify the scope of certification. So what would be the scope of certification? The scope of certification, as discussed by me at the starting of this particular presentation, was if any manufacturing unit or a manufacturer is manufacturing their products which are falling under mandatory BIS compliance outside the jurisdictional territory of India, which is considered abroad, would fall under the foreign manufacturer certification scheme. So once a scope is decided, then that particular manufacturer can go ahead with the application process. Many of you would be a little bit confused regarding the fact when I'm saying manufacturer and when I'm saying manufacturing unit. So in order to clear that particular doubt, I would like to take your attention. This is something which I would cover later on also, but I'll tell you this thing then and there, that BIS certification is not manufacturer supplier specific. It is the manufacturing unit which is certified by the BIS. This must be kept in mind. So if one manufacturing unit has been granted a BIS certification, it cannot be said that the entire manufacturer has the BIS certification. Each and every individual manufacturing unit has to obtain separate BIS certification, and then the products which are produced there can be seamlessly exported towards India, and it could be cleared by the customs and then subsequently be sold in the Indian market. So as I was telling you that the application process is the most crucial and important process. However, in case of foreign manufacturers, there is a role of authorized Indian representatives. This is something which I would cover. I have prepared a dedicated slide of how the authorized Indian representative, which is AIR, functions, which I would be coming at the later stage of the presentation. After an authorized Indian representative is appointed by the selected group company or a foreign manufacturer in terms of how Bureau of Indian Standard classifies it, there is a requirement of testing and compliance, which I had discussed in the previous slide. So testing and compliance is conducted when an audit takes place. But as you can see, there is also, as you can see on the screen, I have highlighted a point which is called certificate of conformity. So the thing is that why I was emphasizing that an application process needs to be so robust, and the most of the attention shall be paid and the most of the time shall be invested into creating an application and providing them with a particular application which convinces them beyond the reasonable doubt that all the quality management checks for a particular manufacturing unit far outreaches the Indian standard requirements which are there. Why do I say so? Because there is an option to avoid testing and compliance as well. So what happens is, if our application is robust and we have submitted them with all the available documents under the sun, which are internationally recognized, as well as it gives the BIS a heads up that a particular manufacturing unit has already been complying or far exceeding the requirement of the Indian standards. So these are the subject matter experts during the audit inspection. They take a decision that we are convinced beyond reasonable doubt, and this factory does not require to be sampled and sent to India to a BIS recognized lab for an equivalent certificate or a lab test report. Rather, they believe on based upon the application documents which they have got from you, as well as the test reports that we have set forth, and the quality management certifications or other equivalent technical certifications of international authority would be there. They will be having the option to grant you a certificate of conformity, circumventing the entire testing and compliance process. So this, let me tell you, when I say this, certificate of conformity remains a privilege and not a matter of right. So it is the Bureau of Indian Standards officials or the subject matter experts who would be upon the audit inspection would take a decision whether to send your product for testing in a BIS recognized lab in India, or whether to grant you a certificate of conformity. So there is always a possibility that a particular set of manufacturing unit or a manufacturer has given all the required documents under the sun, but that particular individual during the audit inspection is not convinced with what he or she is seeing in front of their eyes in the factory itself, and they can then also sample your product and send to India. But if the documentation is made so robust, then the possibility of getting a certificate of conformity is really high. So next comes the timeline and fees of the BIS certification. So as you can see, all the steps which are there, and unfortunately, with regards to the foreign manufacturers, the entire process is offline. So there is no online portal in which a particular documentation is uploaded. Although upon reaching the selective line ministry, which is, for example, the Ministry of Heavy Industries, they could create a one-off portal under which you can send your documents. But in essence, the entire FMCS process is manually done and is paper and pen based. So each and every step from preparing the application and preparing the technical file, then conducting the audit and inspection, because obviously India, as an Indian passport holder, we don't have access to much of the countries, and mostly it is Europe which is concerned. Then there is a visa process which takes around 4 to 5 weeks to get confirmed, and post which, with the availability of the subject matter experts, a visit is conducted. So because it is a very geopolitical oriented system, as well as a long processing is taken by the Bureau of Indian Standard, as it is a pen and paper based compliance process entirely, you can expect each process to take around 6 to 8 weeks to complete. And given the quantum of application that the Bureau of Indian Standards is having right now, you can easily perceive that this would in cases exceed more than 1 year. And we have to be very careful in filing the application, because as I was telling you, if all the details submitted by us is of highest quality, and let's suppose we have identified a different Indian standard which might be applicable, in that particular case we would be getting a reply from the BIS in the next 4 to 6 weeks by saying that we regret to inform you, but we understand that your product attract mandatory BIS certification, but the scheme that you have opted for, or the Indian standard that you have applied for under your products are falling, are wrong. So that is why a technical assessment has to be undertaken in order to determine what sort of applications and how many applications has to be filed. So every step takes 4 to 6 weeks to complete. If every step of the procedure is done rightly, we can expect the certificate to arrive in 6 to 8 months. Otherwise, you can add 6 to 8 weeks if the BIS would come onto you by saying that this particular Indian standard or the scheme opted for is not correct. So there is no end to how much time it would take. But if everything is done by keeping in mind that every representation that has been made in the application document which has been submitted is of highest quality, and we have pinpointed the exact HSN codes along with the product description, then you may perceive that it would take around 6 to 8 months to complete. And with the given timelines as of now, it could be around 1 year when everything is done right. So now the question is of the validity and renewal of the license. So validity and renewal of the license, there is nothing written about what is the minimum amount for which a BIS license is issued. Usually in general discourse, it is issued for 2 or 3 years, but a BIS has the discretion to issue you a certificate for 1 year or a maximum of 6 years as well. So in terms of renewal of license, how it flows is that during the time of the renewal, these particular steps won't be repeated. The renewal of application remains relatively easier, and then a representation can be filed to the BIS that our products remaining the same, and the manufacturing unit is the same manufacturing unit that we were constructing our products in or manufacturing our products in. And then BIS, with the representation and the justification provided, would grant you a renewal of certification so that your business line is not disrupted. Can I have the next slide, please? So let us come to the most discussed scheme, which is Scheme 10. So with the advent of Scheme 10, there is a popular belief that Scheme 10 was introduced last year with the Omnibus Technical Regulation Order of 2024. The assumption is completely unfounded because Scheme 10 was first of all introduced with an Electrical Equipment Order of 2019. Which applied for low voltage switch gears and control gears. But because of advent of COVID-19 in 2020, the Indian government and the Ministry of Electronics have been extending it from that period of time with the validity of 6 months or 1 year. It led to the belief among these industry stakeholders that whatever will be introduced under Scheme 10, the validity of which would be extended by the government beyond comprehension, and it would not lead to the disruption of the business chain that they're having. Although COVID-19 remains the biggest reason for that, and as we are seeing with the advent of the second quality control order or the Omnibus Technical Regulation Order of 2024, it has been made clear by the BIS officials that they are considering of giving no extension, for which the deadline has been set for 28th of August 2025. So under Scheme 10, all the scope, the application process, machinery and equipments, as well as the conformity to the Indian standards, the certification and enforcement process and the authority remains the same. What has changed with Scheme 10 is earlier what used to happen when FMCS, the native process was there and Scheme 10 was not launched. Whatever products were falling under the mandatory certification requirement, it was required by the manufacturer who is importing a particular set of components from, let's suppose, hundreds of different of suppliers. The BIS requested the end manufacturer who is compiling a particular product to provide them with the BIS certification from the suppliers as well. This created a long-standing problem. For example, if a particular company is taking certain set of equipment from X supplier and he or she is supplying only 20 units of those in a year, then it did not make any sort of business sense for that supplier to undergo a BIS certification requirement. And hence, that component being crucial to the manufacturer who is willing to send their products into India, it put them into a situation where they could not do anything apart from finding a supplier who could be of subpar quality or who could be charging them more. So Scheme 10 is the evolvement and the development based upon the industry stakeholders feedback that the Bureau of Indian Standards and Line Ministry got. Under Scheme 10, it has been harmonized by saying that if an end manufacturing unit is assembling or manufacturing the end product, let me take for an example, in the Scheme 10 and the order which is covered, can I have the next slide? Yeah, so this is the order, which is the Omnibus Technical Regulation Order of 2024. It falls under Scheme 10. So if you would ask me how the scheme has to be identified, first of all, you have to take a product. Let us take pumps for an example. So it will take all types of pumps which are there. So for example, I've written K Limited, a German company with a manufacturing unit for car parts in the Czech Republic, aims to enter the Indian market. However, obtaining BIS certification is a mandatory requirement for their products. How can this situation be addressed for smooth entry into the Indian market? So we will classify this by understanding the scope. So for example, it is a German manufacturer with a manufacturing unit located in Czech Republic. So we have to ascertain whether there is a one manufacturing unit or two manufacturing unit or n number of manufacturing units which are there. If let's suppose K Limited has identified there is a one manufacturing unit which is there, then they have to go for the BIS certification for that individual manufacturing units. And let's say there is a car part which is manufactured, for example, gearbox, which is manufactured. So gearbox is not a single component. It is the entire system setup, which is made up of thousands of small components which are there. So those thousands of small components could be outsourced by, let's say, hundreds of suppliers, uh, which are there across world based upon the mutual decision or the quality assurances that that supplier provides to the final assembling company. So let's suppose K Limited is manufacturing a gearbox. They are taking different components from different suppliers for assembling a gearbox. So right now, what they will do under Omnibus Technical Regulation Order and under Scheme 10 is they would want those particular suppliers to give them a certificate describing the technical know-how of the components which is supplied to them for which a gearbox is constructed. So for example, supplier X would give them an in-house testing report or any other testing tolerance report for X component to K Limited, for which they are using these components in their ultimate gearbox. And when they are constructing the gearbox as a whole by taking the different components from different suppliers, they would approach BIS by saying that, see, we have filed an application and our ultimate product is the gearbox for which we need the BIS license. However, these are the details of hundreds of suppliers from which we are sourcing our components, which forms an essential part to construct our gearbox. So BIS would want you to exhibit to them that this is the component which has been taken by X supplier, and this is the report of that particular component and the chemical composition. And at the end of the day, it is K Limited who would file a representation under Scheme 10 and Omnibus Technical Regulation Order to the Bureau of Indian Standard for the final certification. So at the end of the day, it is the ultimate equipment which is getting BIS certified and which remains the gearbox. And that is why the wordings, if you'll see under the Omnibus Technical Regulation Order of 2024, it explicitly says that all types of tooth or gear equipments, including gearboxes and or their assemblies, sub-assemblies and components. So this has been willfully done so as to avoid the confusion where a respective manufacturer would have to approach its supplier to get BIS certified by just taking the declaration about the quality management from their respective component suppliers. Now they can go ahead with taking the BIS certification of the ultimate product that they're constructing. So that is the difference between Scheme 10 FMCS and the Omnibus Technical Regulation Order, which is covered under Scheme 10. And as told you, the Omnibus Technical Regulation Order is the second quality control order which has been passed under Scheme 10. It came into effect on 28th of August 2024, and the deadline for compliance remains 1 year from the date of notification, which would be 28th of August 2025. Can we have the next slide, please? So under the Omnibus Technical Regulation Order, the conformity is really vivid. It covers more than 200 plus products which are falling under the ambit of Ministry of Heavy Industries. So they have classified it into three schedules or three types, as I can say. The type A is IS 16819 or ISO 12100 which deals with the safety of machinery and the general principle for avoiding the design risk assessment and risk reduction. So this is the most basic form of certification. So type A certification mainly is concerned about the risk reduction and the safety general requirements which are there. So this is the first time that under a particular quality control order, they have given a corresponding ISO standards as well. So there is a lot of confusion that if we are already compliant with the ISO certification, do we need to apply for the BIS process or it is automatically confirmed? In an ideal world, this should be the situation, but as it stands, because BIS is an independently acting body, they would want you to supplement that particular ISO certification for their consideration, but you have to follow the application process. There is no automatic route of recognizing the ISO certification which is there. So in case of Omnibus Technical Regulation Order, Type A standards are the basic standards, uh, which is applicable for all the products in case Type B or Type C standards are not notified for that product group. So Type A standards are risk assessment standards, Type B standards are IEC standards, which mainly deals with, loosely we can say it is electromagnetic competence standards which are there. And Type C standards are detailed safety requirements for a particular machine or the group of machines. So as you can see, we have made a hierarchy. So the thing is that if Type C standard is prescribed for a particular equipment or the components, assemblies or sub-assemblies, then Type C standards will take precedence from Type B and Type A standards. So it can be easily understood that Type C supersedes Type B and Type C supersedes Type A. And obviously it is very logical that Type C supersedes Type B and A combined. So Type A has been mentioned in the first schedule, and the Indian standard for Type A remains the same, which you can see on your screen as IS 16819-2018, which is equivalent to ISO 12100-2010. Regarding Type B, there are various IEC standards which have to be catered down by the manufacturer depending upon their product type, and with the technical analysis, which remains the most important part to be done, we have to cater down to a point by seeing the mechanism with which a particular product type or a component is working, and that IEC code, IEC standard has to be identified, and an equivalent Indian standard which has been prescribed under which that application has to be filed. When we come on to the Type C standards, it is not the entire Indian standard which would be applicable. So under the Type C standard, which is mentioned under the third schedule of Omnibus Technical Regulation Order, you would see that under Type C, compliance with a particular clause of a certain Indian standard has been mandated. For example, in case of compressor, there is clause 8 of IS 16827, if I'm not wrong. So a manufacturer should comply with that particular clause. In addition with that, they have to comply with the Type A certification as well. And when Type A deviates from Type C, then Type C would take precedence. So this is how the entire process flow is interpreted, and it becomes very crucial to undertake a technical assessment, uh, with the view of which we come into play, where we identify the HSN codes, the product description of your products, and based upon which we identify the exact Indian standard which might be applicable to your product, as well as the number of applications which have to be filed. So this becomes really crucial while filing, because if it is a case, if Type C particular clause is applicable of a particular standard and an application of Type A has been made by the manufacturer, then it would take us back to the point from where we started, further delaying the process of the grant of BIS certification. Can I have the next slide, please? So as I was telling you during the FMCS slide discussion, that what is an authorized Indian representative? So authorized Indian representative is not required when a company is going for a domestic manufacturer certification scheme. However, for foreign manufacturers, in order to disrupt the issues which could come because of the language difference or the hour difference, the time difference which is there, or the cultural difference which they might face, there is a provisional mandation of appointing an authorized Indian representative. So authorized Indian representative must be an Indian resident. So when I say Indian resident, it is not a mandate that it should be an Indian citizen. As per the Income Tax Act of 1961, if a person who is not of the Indian nationality, or is of a foreign nationality, who has lived in India in the past 1 year for more than 182 days, that particular individual can also be classified to become an authorized Indian representative. However, the thing is that we recommend to all our clients that it should be your Indian subsidiary counterpart which should become an authorized Indian representative. I'll tell you why we recommend so. And it should be a person who is technically aware about the product for which an application has been made. it kills two birds with one stone. First of all, by ensuring the confidentiality, your confidentiality won't be leaked because the group companies will be bound with the same set of confidentiality agreement which is there. Obviously, there is a sense of trust for a particular personnel who is working at the high echelon or the high ranking in the Indian subsidiary. Second thing, because that person would be technically aware regarding the know-how and the product functioning. So in case Bureau of Indian Standards would be having some sort of questions or the queries regarding the application which is submitted, that particular personnel would be able to answer them then and there, avoiding further delaying the processing time which they might have. So it is all done in order to get the certification and the steps moving as soon as possible. And hence it is recommended that it should be a high ranking personnel, particularly from the quality management side, who has the technical know-how about the product flow, about the process flow, the manufacturing process and everything, so that they can answer the BIS officials and with the utmost preservance and the confidentiality of the details which are being shared. So what are the roles and responsibilities of an authorized Indian representative? So the authorized Indian representative is responsible for communicating from the tip of preparation of technical file till the submission of the files to the BIS, conducting the audit and inspection, facilitating the testing, and getting the BIS certification issued. So it is an end-to-end mediator which is there between the foreign manufacturer and the BIS, who would provide them with all the information necessary requirements, would arrange for their travels to abroad in case a visit is conducted, and coordinate with the third-party laboratories for any lab testing report procurement. So, although there is a condition which I would like to inform all of you, that the authorized Indian representative must represent only one manufacturing firm at once. So, for example, there is X GmbH, which has one manufacturing unit in, let's suppose, Germany, and one manufacturing unit here in Chennai. So both the ex GmbH, the AIR which has been appointed, can only represent ex GmbH or their sister concerns or group companies. So the thing is that if an AIR is there for ex GmbH, he or she at once shall represent the cause of ex GmbH and should not take any other company and become an AIR. It is not allowed under the law. And here comes the logic when we say that it should always, we should shall always strive that the Indian subsidiaries high ranking quality management personnel shall be made an authorized Indian representative, because then all the conditions which has been set forth by the BIS regarding the authorized Indian representative are sorted if a particular person in the Indian subsidiary is appointed as an authorized Indian representative. Next, please. So one of the questions that we face during client interactions, that how many applications are required to be filed, and how should we equate that how many number of applications are there. So I've taken an illustration, which is XYZ is a private limited company which owns three different manufacturing units located in different countries. Can XYZ get one BIS certification for the whole company, their manufacturing units being the unit 1 in Belgium, the unit 2 in Italy, and unit 3 in France? And there is also then division that they have, let's suppose, first of all, they have three different countries and three different manufacturing units. So the first case would be, because there are three different manufacturing units located in three countries, then there is a requirement of filing three applications for separate units which are located in Belgium, Italy, and France. Now the question would be, in case in Germany, if we have two manufacturing unit in the same country, which is unit 1 is in Hamburg and unit 2 is in Nuremberg, then in that particular case, how many applications are required to be filed? The answer remains the same, because it is not territory, it is not manufacturer, it is not continent oriented, rather it is manufacturing unit oriented. So if in Germany they have two manufacturing units, they have to file two different individual applications as a whole. And there is also a provision, if there is a third party owned manufacturing unit, then that particular manufacturing unit, which is a third party operated manufacturing unit, has to individually obtain a BIS license in their individual capacity, and they won't be automatically covered under the ambit of the manufacturer. because as said, it is a manufacturing unit oriented license. It is a manufacturing unit oriented quality management system, and not a manufacturer or a group oriented certification. Can I have the next slide? So this is also a very hot topic regarding the seizures and penalties which could happen. So in case the compliance deadline is set forth of 28th of August 2025, what happens if that date is not extended and certain set of manufacturers are not complying with the same and still decide to export their products which are not BIS certified into the jurisdictional or territory of India? So what would happen is, when a particular shipment which is mandated to be required the mandatory BIS certification under the Omnibus Technical Regulation Order, as soon as the consignment would arrive at the custom port or the port of entry, the custom officials would be asking your custom house agent to provide them with a BIS certification. In case the BIS certification is absent, they would inform the BIS officials that a certain set of consignment is not conforming with the BIS certification. Then the BIS official could impose a fine of, let's suppose, $200,000 to $500,000. And then there is a provision in case of multiple default, uh, the imprisonment chances of up to 2 years is also there. So the thing is that it sounds very negligible, that it is only 200,000 Indian rupees to 500,000 Indian rupees, which is 2,000 euros to 5,000 euros. However, the customs do have the right, and the BIS officials do have the right under the new Omnibus Technical Regulation Order and the BIS Act to impose fine of up to 10 times of the value of goods that you're willing to import into India. So let's take for an example, there is a consignment of 20 million euros which is arriving at the port of entry. If the BIS certification is not there, then in remote cases, the BIS can impose a fine of up to 200 million euros. And that is not the end of the game. They would also confiscate those particular machineries and store them at the warehouse. And either they would want you to obtain a BIS certificate by paying hefty warehousing charges, because I told you the entire process may take up to or upwards of 1 year as well. That particular, until and unless that particular machine is not certified, they won't release it. They can impose a fine of up to 10 times of the value of goods as stated, and then they can seize your goods and destroy them at port of entry altogether if the compliance is not ascertained. Also, under the new law, there is a possibility that they would also inform, if you have presence in India, the Indian subsidiaries would be informed. The Indian, for example, Department of Industry, Safety and Health, or the Labor Department would be informed that you are not complying with the certification code or the quality standards which have been set forth. And then they could contact these other authorities as well, and they may move to decide to cancel your production license or the labor law related license or the factory license that you may possess for the Indian subsidiary, completely disrupting the business operations as a whole. So hence, with that, my motive is not to create like fear mongering or create any sort of apprehensions amongst you, but the thing is that the implications of the same are far reaching. And as we can see, today is 29th of April 2025, and the compliance deadline has been set forth as 28th of August 2025. Even if we start with the application, it would take around 2 to 2.5 months to produce a technical file, because it could be as huge as 600 to 800 pages regarding all the documentations which are required. Then it is high time that we encourage you to at least go ahead and filing up with the application. So many of you would be asking, would be coming up with the question that if we have only 119 days to go, and this fellow who's presenting this particular presentation is saying that it could take upwards of a 1 year, then what is the purpose of filing the application altogether? So let me tell you all with an example that we have experienced the same thing 6 months ago with CDSCO. It is the department which is responsible for getting the medical devices imported into India. So there was a notification which has been notified by CDSCO regarding the import of medical devices to get the same certifications. Although it was not a BIS certification, it was a medical device certification which was there. 6 months ago, the deadline of which had passed, but most of the people who have applied for the or have done the application did not receive their confirmation whether a certificate is granted to them or not. So considering the implication that the business operations would get disrupted, they approached CDSCO, which is the regulatory authority responsible for granting the medical device certification so that they can import in India easily. The CDSCO told them explicitly that whosoever has filed the application before the said deadline, we are giving them an exemption to import until and unless the certificate decision, whether it is granted or denied, is reached upon, and they can seamlessly import. And they had given them the exemption because they took the effort of filing the application. And for those manufacturers who were under the apprehension that we won't be able to reach the stage that before the compliance deadline we would be able to get the certification, the CDSCO told them clearly that we cannot grant you any sort of exemptions as you had not even applied before the set deadline. So it becomes really crucial that we go ahead regardless of caring about the extension, which may or might not have, and not put everything on the stake. And we shall strive together and file an application as soon as possible before the considered deadline of 28th of August 2025. And in any matter, if we at Rudel and Partner, we handhold you through the preparation of technical file while answering, while filing your application process and answering any query that Bureau of Indian Standards might have, till organizing and liaising the visits which are there so that it goes seamlessly till the grant of certification. And when the BIS grants you the certification, we will handhold you throughout the process. So if you have any information, I would like to end my side of presentation here. And thank you for hearing me out. I hope I contributed in some way, and let's get this thing done together. Thank you. If you will have any question and answers, I'd be happy to take them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayank. As far as I can see, I mean, that was very comprehensive, and I think it also shows the complexity of the regulations and the different implications that may have there. I think there would be many questions, but on the other hand, I think we're out of time. So I'm referring a little bit to Sana, Niveda, and teams on also on the Rödel side,
Oh,
whether there are any questions that have been recorded that we can answer now.
yes. So we have a lot of questions. So we'll just take up a
Okay,
few questions right now.
please.
Niveda?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first question that we'll go ahead with is components need to undergo risk assessment for the component or for the assembled finished product?
Yeah, so it depends. If it is a assembled finished product that a particular manufacturing unit is producing, then it should be focusing upon the end component. For example, let us take an example. There is a compressor which company A is manufacturing, and it is their end product. So it should be the risk assessment, the type A standards, which is IS 16819 2018, which is equivalent to ISO 12100 2010. They have to do a risk assessment for the entire compressors, because in the case when an equipment is tested and it passes the certain risk assessment and the conformity, it is assumed that all the components which are inbuilt into that particular equipment as a whole would also pass the standardization quality. So, but if a particular manufacturer is only supplying one component of a compressor and that is their end product, then that particular component needs to be certified within the type A standards. So the analogy would be, it is like if a company is manufacturing a mobile device, which consists of, let's say, a processor, a battery, a screen, an aluminum housing, so they don't have to certify it individually. Battery is a different case, but all the other products they don't have to certify individually, but the entire mobile unit is certified and not the components therein. So this remains and this functions on the same analogy. I hope I was able to answer this question.
Okay. The next question that we have is what's the difference between Gazette notification from BIS versus QCO from the line ministry?
Okay, so gazette notification, gazette is a word which comes from the pre-colonial times. So gazette is basically translates into a rough sense as a notification. So in essence, everything passed by the Indian government is a gazette. The quality control orders are the gazette notification which is notified by the line ministry. So Gazette is a super categorization. You can call a notification of a quality control order also a Gazette order, or a notification, let's suppose creating a new state in India, also a Gazette notification. But quality control orders are those gazettes which are filed by the respective line ministries for a particular set of products. So these are specialized notifications which could be called as gazette, and there could be a different notification which could also be called as a gazette.
Okay, the next question that we have is, could you please help us understand the BIS Scheme 10 and the Certificate of Conformity?
So as I told, that scheme 10 is a process under which a particular order is notified. As I informed during the presentation, that right now there are two schemes which are I'm so sorry, there are two orders which are operating under scheme 10. One is the electrical equipment safety requirement order of 2019. The second one is the omnibus technical regulation order 2024. So these are two orders which are working under scheme 10. However, certificate of conformity is a process, is an option which is extended to the subject matter expert when a particular product when an audit inspection for a particular product is conducted. So certificate of conformity remains a privilege which could be granted to a particular manufacturer. So it is part of the application process. However, the scheme 10 has the orders which would grant you the Indian standards through which you can undergo a particular process. This is the difference between both of it.
Okay, we have the next question. Is there a dual registration required for foreign manufacturers and CRS?
So as I told you, CRS deals with compulsory registration scheme. If your product by the given set of product, which as per my latest information is 56, they have increased right now. So if your products are listed under compulsory registration scheme, then you should go ahead with the compulsory registration scheme if your product type and HSN code falls within what has been notified by them. But if it falls under scheme 10 with the utility which has been given in the first, second, as well as the third schedule, then you have to obtain it through scheme 10. So right now this question is coming from the fact, and here it becomes very important, and I would like to re-highlight this, that it could never be the case that two different schemes or dual schemes would apply for a single product. Either the HSN code by the said individual is not identified to the core, and that particular individual has to go through the exercise of HSN cleanup and identify exactly what product we are looking into, because it is rare that two different schemes for a single product would apply under CRS as well as scheme 10. So that is something that we should collectively be aware of, is identifying the exact product type for which we are going under the BIS certification.
The next question is, what is Scheme 10 and how is it different from the ISI scheme?
Yeah, so I guess this question was largely covered under the presentation which was there. So
So
ISI scheme is the oldest scheme. Scheme 10 is a modification from 1946 to 2024. It could be carved in a nutshell. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next, which is we want to apply for the BIS Scheme 10 license under Foreign Manufacturer Certification Scheme. However, the QCO for the BIS Scheme 10 mentions that we need to apply through the MANAC online. Upon
Mhm.
reviewing the platform, we found that there is no provision or option for this FMCS. Could you please
Mhm.
clarify the actual procedure for applying under FMCS?
So I would like to segregate this particular question, and thank you for asking this particular question. The thing is that Manak Online is only responsible for taking in the domestic manufacturer certification scheme and the scheme 10, which a particular domestic manufacturer is applying for. For the foreign manufacturers, it cannot be done through Manak Online, but by the portal, as I was covering it in my presentation, but by the portal which could be specifically requested by the Ministry of Heavy Industries, which would grant an option to upload the documentation then and there. So largely the scheme 10 and the FMCS process is the reason you were not able to find it on manak.gov.in, because unfortunately the Indian government has not created a portal for a foreign manufacturer to apply, and that is why that it was not reflecting onto the portal. Had it been a domestic manufacturer, he or she can go ahead by applying for the license on manak.gov.in. But for foreign manufacturer, it has to be the communication with the line ministry, and it has to be done completely based upon pen and paper by following the steps that has been discussed in the presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Our next question is BIS only bound to the manufacturing location or also concerning specific products manufactured in that location?
So the thing is that, first of all, BIS is granted to a manufacturing unit, as was covered during the presentation. Secondly, the thing is that if that particular manufacturing unit is producing 5 different set of products, and the equivalent Indian standard has to be outlined in the application, and then BIS would consider those, let's say, 5 set of products under the Indian standards which are given, and then subsequently a BIS certification would be granted. So in a nutshell, it is the manufacturing unit. We have to determine how many manufacturing unit, and then for each and every individual manufacturing unit, how many product types are there. We have to list it in the application and then move ahead with the application to the BIS.
Okay. Our next question is from a German company who imports their products from Germany. The question is, at the time of custom clearance, it is asked to submit an applicable BIS certificate. Is it mandatory to provide such a BIS certificate for all imported products or specified list of products? Further,
Mhm.
the imported products are compliant with EU or IEC standards certificate on which most of the BIS standards are taken input from. Do we need to obtain again the BIS certification for all these imported products by carrying out all these types of tests as per the applicable BIS standards? This will amount up to a repeat of tests.
Yeah, so as I was discussing this, this might sound a little bit annoying that BIS would want you to go ahead with the same certification requirement. But to answer your second question first, the IEC standards which would be applicable are there, and I can understand that these are the equivalent standards on which Indian standards are made. But BIS would want you to undergo the safety and assessment requirement again, because it is an independent body constituted by the Indian Parliament, which derives its power from the Bureau of Indian Standards Act of 2016. And it would want you to file an application and then provide them with the ISO certification or the IEC certification that you might have, which would be an added advantage. But for the entire process flow, an application is required to be filed, with the way of which, by seeing the documents and the applications, the BIS would take the final decision whether to issue you a BIS certificate or not. And regarding the products, to answer your first question regarding the products which the custom would want or require a BIS mandation. So the customs would only require the BIS mandation for the products which are already covered under the quality control orders. So let's suppose if you're importing 1,000 components into India, out of which 900 components are not BIS compulsory, or in other language, we can say it is BIS free, then the customs would allow you to take those 900 products into India. But for the remaining 100 products for which a BIS mandation is required, then they would want you to exhibit a BIS certificate which is there, in absence of which those 100 products will be stuck at port of entry until and unless a BIS certificate is produced in front of the custom officials.
Our next question is there a labeling requirement for products which have got FMCS certification?
So BIS in traditional sense prescribes a labeling requirement and a homologation requirement, and in India we see it everywhere. Like we see, as I started my entire presentation with, we see it on the water bottles, we see on the helmets that we use while riding our two-wheelers, we see it on the medical devices which are there. It is although overlooked because nobody gets and observes it, but when you seem to observe, there is a labeling which is done for each and every equipment. It is having a BIS certification. Even the mobile phones that we are using under legal and regulatory, we could see a BIS certification as well. So to answer your question, yes, labeling requirements are there, and it is expected by the Bureau of Indian Standard to exhibit the compliance that each and every component shall be BIS certified or homologated.
Okay. Next question is, if we have a machine in accordance to the European standards and an ISO product standard and also European type examination, is it easier to get an Indian certification?
Yeah, it becomes relatively easier. As I was covering during the application process, if we exhibit to the BIS by providing them with all the international compliance certificates that we have, it becomes relatively easier because then the BIS officials, obviously they are aware with the international standards which are already there. So then it helps a particular manufacturer to portray to the BIS that we are already complying with a certain set of mandation which is there, which equalizes or far reaches your safety standards which you have put into place. So ease of getting the certification is always there, but to the core, it is onto the BIS official to decide whether they want you to reevaluate your products again or whether they would accept the international certifications that you have submitted. But application in any case has to be done.
Okay, so the next question that we have is, do we need to test the product in a BIS recognized test lab before submitting the application under FMCS, or should the samples be tested after the factory inspection?
So at that particular moment when the audit inspection would take place, they would decide onto the point whether to grant you a certificate of conformity. Then the testing requirement is gone completely. But in case they decide to test your equipment, they would sample that equipment and seal that equipment by obtaining your signature so that you're witness that nothing has been distorted and it is the same machine which is going or the same sample which is going. So when this requirement is done on the factory, they would want you to send it to a BIS recognized lab in the same sealed condition which they have put. So it would be facilitated by the manufacturer who is going to obtain the license. It would be sent into a BIS recognized lab in India, who is responsible for testing those product type or the Indian standard which might be applicable. And after the testing report is received, a decision is taken by the Bureau of Indian Standard as a whole.
Okay. Next question is, if the product has already been approved by the Indian government organization PESO and is now covered under the QCO, is it mandatory to obtain a BIS license?
Yeah, so PESO license is basically for the products which are using natural gases or petroleum products into it. So these are the explosion certificates which are granted, and not the quality aspect of it. It is not covered. So when BIS, although I can understand in some foreign countries like in Europe, there is a provision of a collective certificate under which explosion proof as well as the quality assurance is determined. But unfortunately, BIS is an independent body which does not accept the PESO license because this is for explosive resistance. While on the other hand, BIS is mainly concerned regarding the quality assurance of the products which are under non-explosive categories. So if there is a product which has an explosive element embedded into it, working on, let's say, natural gas or petroleum or whatnot, then a separate PESO clearance is required in addition with the BIS requirement if there is any. Although it's a really good question, and this is something which I have also been thinking of, and as the industry stakeholders, I would recommend you to file a collective uh, pleading or sort of an prayer to the authorities so that they can consider and come up with a collective certification, because I can understand the implication of the same.
Okay. Next question is, the machine we make seems to be covered under the Scheme 10 by the HS code. However, the machine is not assembled at our site due to size limitations, but instead assembled at client's premises in India. We ship individual parts only. Do we still need to get certified?
Yeah, so then in that particular case, because the final assembly is done in India, if I'm not wrong, so in that particular case, all those components which are sent to India would have to obtain a prior BIS certification. Although it is a very one-off case and a peculiar case, I would recommend the individual to reach out to us so that we can understand the complexity which are involved, because these are very subjective questions which need further analysis. But to give you a holistic answer or like just a skim through answer, the answer would be that those components won't be allowed in the territorial jurisdiction of India if those are falling under Scheme 10. A prior BIS certificate is necessary. But navigating this particular problem would require further dwelling and subjective analysis in order to give you a clear-cut answer in this particular case.
Okay. Our next question is, the OTR Scheme 10. When will the portal to apply be available?
Yeah, it's a very nice question. We have also been following up with the Bureau of Indian Standards. As of now, the OTR portal lands you to a Google form where they require you to fill in all the details and then you're just left at blank. You don't receive any sort of confirmation. This is something which is a work in progress. As of now, at least we have a Google Forms provision from the past 2 months. Earlier, it did not exist as well. So as I can see with the development which is happening, the portal should be up any moment now. It could be tomorrow, it could be day after or a week after now. But unfortunately, it is the government decisions whether they decide to like activate the portal. We are just being observant. It is only recommended to check the BIS website every day in order to chalk out whether the portal is up or not.
Okay, and the last question that we're taking up for now is omnibus technical regulation covers second-hand or used machineries as well.
Yeah, so in essence, second-hand used machineries would be covered under the Omnibus Technical Regulation Order, because if we go through the wording of the entire 26-page long order which has been notified, it nowhere says that it does not apply to used machines or the spare parts which are there. However, in case of one-off imports, there is a possibility of getting an exemption from the respective ministry. Again, this is a question which is very subjective, and we would encourage you to reach out to us so that we can analyze what requirements are there. But in essence, used machineries or spare parts are also not exempt from following these Scheme 10 certifications.
Thank you so much, Mayank. Now I will like to hand over the platform to my colleague, Sana Baghdadi, for the closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So due to time constraint, we are unable to take more questions, but we will send you the contact details of our knowledge partner. And please feel free to reach out to them for any questions or support that you may have. Thank you all for joining us today for this session. A special thank you to our knowledge partner, Rodel and Partner, for this insightful presentation. Thank you, Mayank. As you exit the webinar, a quick survey will appear on your screen, and we would really appreciate if you could take a minute to fill it out. It will help us understand your BIS certification needs and shape future sessions accordingly to better support you. And we also have a handbook titled Roadmap for BIS Certification Succeeding in India available on the IGCC website. So we will share with you the handbook along with the presentation via email. And thank you once again, and we hope to stay connected.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.